Good afternoon, everyone. Come on in. It seems like just yesterday I was opening the conference, because it was, right? Here we are, about to conclude Friends for Life Orlando 2022. I hope you've all had a wonderful experience. Yes? How many of you are parents? How have your kids been? Good? How many of you have teenagers? I have some bad news. They'll be back at 5. So before we get going, I just want to remind you we have a couple of wonderful social events this evening. Family movie night, 7 to 9. The T1D adult social event from 8 to 11. And dessert and posters with the faculty from 9 to 11. And then tomorrow we have a bunch of other activities. Our inaugural golf outing, which departs at 7:15 from the Coronado Ballroom right across here. The Super Bolus event from 9 to noon, and Play with the Pro from 1 to 3. A lot of families then decamp to the pool for the margaritas and the strawberry daiquiris. There's a family carnival tomorrow night, team dance tomorrow night, and then Sunday morning our farewell breakfast right in these rooms. So for our closing keynote, we have a good friend, Oren Liebermann, who I got to know after I read his book, The Insulin Express, which I highly recommend. If you've not read, get it. And I will not spoil anything, but I will say, don't eat the rabbit. Oren, come on up.
All right, is this working? You can hear me loud and clear. Excellent. I've had the privilege of speaking here in person. I think this is my 3rd time, and I spoke 2 times virtually, once because I was overseas and once because the whole world was virtual. So it is great to be back here in person. I previously spoke at the smaller sessions, so this is just a little bit bigger and just a lot more studio lighting. So hopefully this won't disappoint. I hope it's a little bit funny, a little bit inspiring, maybe some ideas. And my wife and I were trying to figure out how to start this because it's bigger. It has to be better. It has to be more engaging. It needs better ideas. So we sat there and we racked our brain. And I think my wife is watching virtually. She did not join at the conference. So Cassie, you can text me your criticisms live. Please just keep it to the presentation though. And we were trying to figure out what to do, how to start this to make it more memorable. And we couldn't come up with any good ideas, but we certainly came up with a whole lot of bad ideas. So then my wife suggested, why don't we just stick to the basics and go from there? So friendly greeting, personal introduction, a meaningful connection between us, and then a statement of purpose, kind of like this.
Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die.
So, hello, that one works well.
My name is Inigo Montoya.
My name is Oren Liebermann.
You killed my father.
Many of us have type 1 diabetes or have a child with type 1 diabetes or a relative.
Prepare to die.
I thought about leaving that one, but that seemed like it was a bit of the wrong tone. So hopefully, again, you'll find something inspiring here or something at least helpful, or you just enjoy the story. This is my personal email. I'll bring this up again at the end. Please feel free to reach out to me on anything. I'm a reporter. I'm CNN's Pentagon correspondent. I've been that for a year and a half. Before that, I was CNN's Jerusalem correspondent for 6 years. So feel free to reach out if you have news questions or a kid who's interested in going into the news. I'm also lucky enough to be a private pilot. We'll talk about that a little bit later. I'm happy to help out in the process of becoming a pilot with type 1 diabetes. I was actually a pilot before I was diagnosed, got type 1 diabetes, and then figured out how to keep doing that. I'm also a father, a husband, a few other things. I was in a horrible band in college. I'm glad that's very much in the past. Please don't use this email for nastygrams, oren.lieberman@1n@gmail.com for those nastygrams, or just jeff.hitchcock at... So my entire career, I've been a TV news reporter. I started in Dover, Delaware, Anybody here from Dover, Delaware? That's kind of a shot in the dark. Did I see a hand?
I thought you were asking something else.
What did you think I was going to ask?
If we knew where Delaware was.
Delaware? The 3 years in Norfolk, Virginia, 3 years in Philadelphia, and at that point, 8 years into my career, my wife and I decided, oh, we have some Norfolks and obviously some Phillies in here. And at that point, my wife and I decided we could do the quote-unquote normal thing, and buy a house and a car and have kids and start our lives, or we could sell everything, put everything else in storage and get on the road. This picture kind of makes it obvious what we chose. So we got backpacks, and we planned a 1-year backpacking around the world, and that was how everything started. This is after we've been married for a year. So this is just after our first anniversary, which, honey, is on 9/9/12, just so you know that I remember. And we got on the road. So we did a couple months in Europe. This was actually our first group picture, our first together picture on the first day. We obviously started in Rome, and then we kept working our way through Italy. And I bring this picture up first because it kind of looks like maybe I was just a little bit overweight. I wasn't uncomfortable with how I looked, but I thought maybe, hey, if we're trekking and backpacking and I lose a few pounds, that's awesome. Our friend in the middle, let's see how, Rada, he couch surfed with us. Has anybody here couch surfed? Man, crickets. Couch surfing is what your parents told you not to do. It's randomly hanging out and crashing on a stranger's couch or having them crash on your couch. You should be careful doing it, but we did it and we had wonderful experiences. Rada has been our friend since this trip. So we worked our way through 2 months in Europe, a few different countries there. And then at the time, my older sister was in Kenya. And I bring this picture up because we went on a safari. I actually added this slide earlier today, and I thought, maybe I should bring in some safari pics because that's kind of the theme of all of this. That's the equator. And then everything else is pretty self-explanatory. This is me. There is food in my mouth. I'm not just making out with a giraffe. There is giraffe food in my mouth, not like a hamburger. Lions and a part of the Masai Mara in Kenya with a whole bunch of elephants. I bring this picture up for another reason. This is one of the last things we did, me and my wife, as we were traveling before I started feeling symptoms. It was just a few days after this. We went right from here to Israel. I have family there. I'm an Israeli citizen as well as an American citizen. And it was there that I started to feel symptoms. This is in a hostel in Jerusalem. Everything we're so used to now talking about, I had no idea what it was. But I made excuses for it for 2 months, starting in Israel. I distinctly remember the first night at my aunt's place that I couldn't sleep through the night because I had to go to the bathroom. And all I thought was, this is weird. I'm sure it'll go away tomorrow. And then I just got used to it. And it was a little after summer. It was still boiling hot there. So I decided everything's fine. It's just hot. I just need to hydrate a little more. Everything will be fine. And then a few days, maybe a week after I'd started showing symptoms, on this day, as we went down to Eilat in the Red Sea to go snorkeling, my wife said, it looks like you're losing weight. And I thought, well, that's fantastic. I wanted to lose a little weight. And of course I was losing weight because we were traveling and backpacking. The part that didn't quite fit into this calculation is that on the drive down to here, which was about a 4-hour drive from where we were, I was eating these things. They are not calorie-free, and I had about 4 of them on the way down. If you can lose weight after eating 4 of these, I need to know your exercise routine. And this kept going. So we were here for a couple of weeks. We went to Jordan. I'll bring this picture back up a little later on for a comparison. This was in, we'd gone to see Petra. Who here has seen The Last Crusade? That's Petra, where you go in and you see a 700-year-old knight. It's actually in Jordan, it's Petra. There is no 700-year-old knight when you go into the opening. There's almost nothing when you go into the opening, but it's a beautiful facade, and that's what you go see. We stayed in the middle of Wadi Rum, in the middle of the desert, and all I remember thinking was, please don't have to go to the bathroom too many times tonight because it's freezing out in the middle of the desert. Thankfully, and I remember being actually thankful for this, I only had to go to the bathroom once in the middle of the night. And I thought that was all right, great, no problem. After we understand not everyone is lucky enough to have the opportunity to travel, to backpack around the world, even if we try to do it as cheaply as possible. So we wanted to give back. My wife, Cassie, on the right there, is an English as a second language teacher. So we signed up to teach English to young Buddhist monks in training in Nepal. But before we did that, the group company with us organized a hike to Annapurna Base Camp. Not Everest Base Camp. Annapurna is the first 8,000-meter mountain climb 3 years before Everest. So we just went to the base camp at a mere 14,000 feet. And we started at about 3,000 feet. So about 11,000 feet of elevation gain over the course of 5 days. And if I'd been feeling symptoms before, this was when I pushed my body well past its breaking point. And we were moving at a pretty good pace. I had cramps, but I would just sort of hydrate and rest afterwards. I walked a little slower. That candle is the only source of heat and light at about 9,000 feet. It was freezing there. And then after we crossed the third day or so, there was always snow everywhere. It was gorgeous, but I would just shovel snow into my mouth. Walk 2 feet, more snow. Another few feet, more snow. And you're on a mountain and there aren't that many people around. So if you have to go to the bathroom, you just go to the bathroom. And those are the sleeping bags we always had with us. And we kept moving. The last day up, that is, it took us a few days to get down. That's Annapurna Base Camp in the background. This is not far. I suspect some of you could throw a baseball this far, probably. That took me about a half an hour. We woke up early, had nothing to eat, and just started hiking. And I thought about crawling. I thought about quitting. And then our guide came and gave me, I forget what the food was, just something. In hindsight, it boosted my sugars a little bit. My wife asked me to stop it here and to take a pretty picture with her. And I shouted something at her and said, we're not there, and kept moving. I was in such a bad spot that I refused to stop for the iconic photo, and I told her, we'll get on the way back. At the top, and this is actually in Annapurna Base Camp, we had finally made it. I had some tea, and I bought the most expensive can of Coke I've ever purchased in my entire life. In hindsight, that spiked my blood sugar to where I was used to it being. I felt great, and then I basically ran down the mountain and gave my wife the photo I promised her, stopping here with a smile on my face. And this is just more on the way down. I bring this up for two reasons. This was like the best hot thermal spring I've ever relaxed in. It was unbelievable. And then a moment of silence, please, for all the hair I used to have. I keep on getting afraid every time I cut it, it's going to get angry and not come back. We then got into teaching. So this is called Matapani Gumba. It is a Buddhist monastery where they teach young monks how to be Buddhist, or what it is to be Buddhist. And we came here every day to teach little kids English as a second language. Which is to say, my wife taught them English as a second language, and these are still young kids, regardless of what religion or what they're learning. So they were a little rambunctious, and I was the disciplinarian. And I was very good at that, especially because my temper was very short, because I was in quite bad shape at this point. So that's my wife teaching our kids. And we saw them every day until right about here. This is the day before I went to the doctor for the first time. And I'd refused to go. My parents and my in-laws had both said, you look a little thin. And I thought, oh, great, I wanted to lose some weight. I didn't quite realize how much weight I had lost. But here we were learning to make samosas. And they were teaching us, and we made them. And we had a blog, and I intended to do a little blog post about it, so we took some pictures. That's me right before, the day before I went to the doctor for the first time. And for comparison's sake, there's about a 40-pound difference there, a 45-pound difference. Ken, is everything okay? Everything's okay. And after this, I was determined not to go. I was at this point fighting with my parents. I suspect those of you with kids might know a little bit about that. And randomly, and perhaps this was a bit of divine intervention, perhaps it was just luck, the monastery canceled class the next day. So I said, all right, let's go. Let's go to a doctor. And at that point, I stepped on a scale, and it was in kilograms because the rest of the world. And I did the math in my head, and I thought, that can't be right. I'm 20 kilos, 23 kilos, whatever the number is, less than what I weighed. So it was about 45 pounds. And then I thought, all right, maybe the doctor was a good idea. For those of you who are just wondering if going to the doctor or hospital in Nepal is a good idea, only in an emergency, please, for your own sake. The doctor diagnosed me with a lack of nutrition and said, eat more chicken and have some more fruit juice and you'll feel fine. Turns out, I didn't feel fine, and 3 days later, I went from going downhill like this to going downhill something like this. And one of our friends told us, one of our friends was a nurse, and she didn't say diabetes at the time, but she clearly knew what she was looking for, because she said, if his breath ever starts to smell like fruit, hospital immediately. So my wife would smell my breath, and it smelled like something, but we're like, that doesn't smell like fruit, so it's probably nothing to worry about. At that point, I was definitely in DKA, and so we went to the doctor on February 13th, and he was the first one to test my blood sugar. And when we went back, he knew, I always had the feeling he knew it might have been diabetes. I didn't quite ask him this, because he immediately pulled out a blood sugar monitor. And I'll never forget what he said. He said, "I'm sorry to tell you, my friend, you have diabetes." I barely remember anything after that, although I do remember him telling me he also has diabetes. And then in hindsight later on, I was like, shouldn't you have realized this 3 days ago then? But I've never had the chance to ask him. And I went back the next day for a pre-prandial and a post-prandial, and we confirmed. And we had tickets booked for that night. And that was, I'd like to say it was the first time I broke down in tears. It was not. It was probably the 50th. And my wife asked me if we should go to the hospital, and I said yes. So on the date where I was officially told you have type 1 diabetes, it was Valentine's Day 2014, and I checked into a hospital in Pokhara, Nepal. Straight into this room. I don't know what this room was. I did not have a good time there. That's a forced smile. And then into what would become my hospital room. Sorry, not a hotel room. It cost $10 a night. Over the 4 nights I was there and all the medicine they gave me, it came to a total of, anybody want to guess at this? $198. It was worth about 60 bucks. There was no hot water. That's my sleeping bag to stay warm. And whenever I see this picture, I can still feel that IV in my hand. And it's not a good feeling. I don't have this picture up in too many places. We were there for 4 nights, and by coincidence, they tested my blood sugar at 9 in the morning. They took blood. I found out the results at 5 p.m. And at the time, I was like, okay, this is normal. This is how it's done. And very quickly realized this is not how it's done. I should have this answer in about 10 seconds. And they gave me, I forget if it was a 70-30 or an 80-20 insulin, which was completely unrelated to whatever it was that I was eating, because that's how diabetes is handled in Nepal. When all you eat is lentil beans and rice, diabetes gets easier, although rice for me is always a bad idea. And we were here for 4 nights until we decided this is absurd, we're leaving. We happened to know a doctor in Kathmandu, and he said, look, it's 4 hours door to door from the hospital you're at, quick flight, to a clinic in Kathmandu. These are the pictures I sent my parents to make them believe everything was okay. My wife was my miracle worker here. The hospital also had no Wi-Fi, so just keep adding to the list of things we didn't have. So my wife would have to deal with me, and she was on the same learning curve as me on diabetes, and then she'd have to go and deal with my family, which was like 50 times harder. And I think eventually she just said, enough, I'm focusing on you so we can head home. We spent 4 nights there. We then ended up at this clinic. I wish I had more pictures of this. If anybody's ever going to Nepal, and I highly recommend it because it's incredible, you haven't seen a mountain until you've seen the Himalayas. These are the doctors you want, and the clinic is very much still there and is a great clinic. It was actually a Western clinic, so I paid Western prices, but at this point, anything that got me moving in the right direction was what I wanted. And they cleared me after 2 nights to fly home. They completely changed my insulin. They threw out the 70-30 or the 80-20, I don't remember which one it was, and put me on Humalog and Lantus, which I used for years until I switched for insurance reasons and insulin pens. And they got me to the point where I could get home. That's my dad, very happy to see me. That flight was delayed because of a winter storm, so I spent 20 hours on an airplane, which is the most I've ever spent on one airplane without leaving my seat, except like to go to the bathroom. But my wife and I made a decision very quickly. We decided we were going to keep traveling. We were halfway through our trip, and we were determined to finish it after our doctor said, or my doctor said, you're good to go. And to his credit, he was an incredible doctor because he made it very simple. He said, look, this isn't complicated. It might be hard. It might be very frustrating at times, but if your blood sugar is high, take insulin. If it's low, just always carry snacks with you. And he just boiled it down to that. And he said, look, just know what your blood sugar is, and you're going to be fine. They had me on a bit of a sliding scale in Nepal. He made the sliding scale a bit more aggressive, but he said, this isn't complicated. So we were determined, after a month at home, to get back on the road, and we created our little diabetes toolkit. So this I think is pretty much all of it. I didn't realize how fast I'd go through that, and these, my low glucose snacks, but I also quickly realized that anywhere in the world you can hop in a convenience store and get something sweet. And we then went to Southeast Asia, and they have coconuts for like $1.50. Found out those were great, especially in the brutal heat of Southeast Asia. For 2 years I did this. This is, I don't know if you're able to read it. This is a blank notebook I filled out with every single blood sugar I had, everything I ate, and its effect on my blood sugar. I did it for 2 reasons. First, I wanted to learn as quickly as I could about what food and exercise and activity does to my blood sugar, and it was a very good way to do that. And second, I mentioned earlier, I'm lucky enough to be a pilot. My first thought when I was diagnosed was, oh my God, I have diabetes. And my second thought was, oh my God, I might never fly again. So that specifically was to deal with the FAA, like, look, I have all my numbers and they're pretty good. I did this for about 2 years. My doctor actually recommended, and again, I'm not a healthcare professional, so any idea I have is simply how I've done it. But he said, look, you can't keep this up. Your numbers are phenomenal, but you're gonna risk burning yourself out. And that is far more dangerous to you than being a little more slack, more relaxed, and never running the risk of burning yourself out. You can't quit on this, or you're in trouble. So after doing that for 2 years, and eventually I started skipping a day and then skipping more days and just getting into more of a sort of a workable rhythm. This is everything I threw in there. I always liked gummy lifesavers as my snack because they were easily calculatable and it was lifesavers, so I thought that was somewhat clever. If you think that's clever, you should see my reporting. And then we stacked up on insulin pens and a whole lot of test strips and just stocked it all. My parents didn't meet us at my parents and my in-laws met us at 2 points on the rest of the trip. So it was great because I had what I thought I would need and I had a very bad idea of what I thought I would need. Extras, and then they met and restocked my supplies. And we got back on the road. I've always considered this the single most important decision I've ever made, except naturally the decision to marry my wife. And that's the end of my presentation. I don't think this was the smartest decision I've ever made. In fact, if you were to poll most of the doctors here, they probably would ask, are you crazy getting back on the road a month in? But my reasoning was, and I'm not saying this was good reasoning, it was my reasoning, traveling with diabetes will always be different. So even if I'm home for a year and get into a great rhythm, the second I get on the road, it's new. So who cares if it's new a month in or a year in? I don't think that's a great rationale, but it's the rationale I used to get back on the road, and we kept traveling. Had I not gotten back on the road at this point, I don't think I'd be standing in front of you here today. I don't think I would have been a CNN reporter. I have no idea what I would be doing, but I view much of what follows as a consequence of this decision to keep traveling. It was the decision I made very early on just to keep going. Okay, I have diabetes, I'm gonna do the homework, and then I'm gonna do whatever it is that I want. I've often told my bosses in interviews, and then those who I wanted to be my bosses but didn't hire me after this answer, they asked, why are you a journalist? And I said, I'm having a good time, and you'll know when I'm no longer having a good time because I'm gonna stop doing it. And some managers didn't like that answer, but that's what I do. If it's a good time, I'm gonna keep doing it. And I wanted to keep doing everything that was fun. Flying airplanes, traveling, biking, tennis, which I'm quite bad at. But I wanted to keep doing all of that. So all I had to do was do the homework, and I could do that. In that sense, I will take a quick pause from the story here. I've always considered myself a bit lucky to be diagnosed at 31. I was diagnosed 8.5 years ago. And that means I got to eat whatever I want for 31 years, and I got to drink whatever I wanted for 10 years. And I think it is lucky to have been put in that situation. For me, it was a lot easier just to kind of buckle down and say, all right, this is how I'm going to live. I used to tell people I'm healthier with diabetes than I ever was without. I exercise more. I eat much better. I think I maintain a slightly better weight here. But then after diabetes, I had an emergency appendectomy. I blew out my knee before diabetes and something else. And I was like, I don't think I can say I'm healthier than I was before diabetes because things have changed. These are just some pictures from our travels. That's Angkor Wat. This is a temple near Angkor Wat. That's in Thailand. I forget exactly where, and that's a famous tree, I think in Cambodia. But this was part of what we were able to see, and this is what made me happy. This is what I was determined to keep doing. Of course, not all things go as they're supposed to. We were in Laos, and how many doctors are here? Because I have a medical question. Doxycycline is an antibiotic, yes? So we had it there for malaria. In Laos, it wiped me out. It cleaned out my stomach. I got violently ill a few times, and this is just a few weeks after we started traveling again, and I honestly thought this was an idiotic decision. But after a couple of days, I don't know if I got used to the doxy. I don't remember if I just stopped taking it, but things kind of got into a much better rhythm. I didn't actually tell my parents about that until much later. I reached out to a doctor friend of mine who said, can I keep going? And she said, yeah, you can keep going. Just give it a couple days. Next country was Cambodia. I had a hideous bag about this big. It was like red plaid, and it had my diabetes supplies in it. I had a cargo pocket. It was right here. And we were walking. We were actually at the Foreign Press Club in Phnom Penh. For history buffs, the last interview with the Khmer Rouge's Pol Pot was filed from this bar, which is why we had a drink here. And as we're walking around, I hear a motorcycle accelerate behind me and think briefly, well, that's interesting. And then they grabbed my bag, thinking it was my wallet, and zoomed off. So I lost an insulin pen, which wasn't that big a deal because I had other insulin pens. I lost my one-touch blood sugar monitor, which was a very big deal because they did not have another one of those. And we needed a backup plan very quickly. As I came to learn, and this is for everybody who wants to travel, especially to any place considered exotic, almost every country on this planet, if not literally every country on this planet, has a diabetes association. And they told me where to go, what to look for. I don't remember if I found one touches here, but they used the not American measurement. So it gave me a reading of like 8. And I was like, what the heck is this? I don't know what this means. So we found one of these, a Glucosure Plus. Has anybody ever seen one or used one of these? Oh, he almost raised a hand and then he just went like this. This became my blood sugar monitor for a few weeks until I could get back to the US. It was just a way of working what was an incredibly difficult problem. And I remember we told the woman at the hostel we were staying at, and she started to cry. And I remember thinking, like, this is you're not the one who should be crying in this situation, but obviously thank you for feeling for me. My dad, my parents, and probably some of my friends, and definitely my brother, had tried to encourage me, like, don't do Trekkie type stuff. Don't backpack and don't hike. Clearly that didn't work. A few weeks later, we were in China, in the Great Wall of China, and we signed up for a tour to spend a night on the Great Wall itself. That's illegal, by the way, but it's done. And then one more night in a guest village. And that was my first time clearly and definitively away from anything that resembled a hospital. And I made adjustments that I thought would work. Part of this was a WAG. We're all familiar with a WAG? A wild ass guess? Do I want to know what a swag is? Oh yeah, definitely a swag. But I lowered my basal. I kept eating snacks, and it worked. We made it work. I think we actually spent the night in that guard tower, and it was an incredible experience. The most dangerous part of this was falling on this was not a good idea. And we were impressed we got to a touristy part, which was completely redone, and this is the not touristy part. But it was an incredibly liberating experience to have been through this and to have gotten out there. And then one of the thing I'll always remember about the village, aside from the hospitality, was that they had a sign with best mothers-in-law in the village. And I thought that's an incredibly weird award to have. And what do you have to do to win that award and be on the sign? I did not inquire. My Mandarin is not up to par. And then I've just always loved this photo. From here, we went to Japan. My parents met me. My dad, I should have said, I'm the only person in my entire family with type 1 diabetes. That does not stop my dad from giving me all the advice in the world that he wants to give me. For a while, he has since stopped. But he tried to encourage me not to do this. This is the Inca Trail. We didn't just take the train. We hiked the 4-day Inca Trail. And this was the first real challenge, not only because it was a much longer hike. We were hiking 10 to 12 hours a day, but also because we were very far away from medical care. So it was basically me and my wife. And they did have one of those guys there supposed to be a medical, I don't want to say quite a nurse because he didn't have that level of training, but was supposed to be able to step in. But the main guide was clearly relieved when I said with a completely false confidence, don't worry, we got this. And we started hiking. And there were a lot of similarities that I've always found fascinating between this hike and the hike that almost killed me in Nepal. The same altitude, roughly the same distance. This had less of an altitude change. You didn't climb quite as much. But I viewed it as the chance to sort of raise a fist at diabetes and keep moving. This is Dead Woman's Pass. I think this is the highest point of the entire hike. It's almost exactly the same height as Annapurna Base Camp. It is called Dead Woman's Camp, not because any woman died there, but because when you look at the ridgeline, it kind of looks like a lying down woman, but lying down woman's pass is not a good name for anything. And then I've always included just some pics from the trail. This is chicha, that's corn beer. Speaking of false smiles, it was disgusting. But I have a rule we'll get to in a second, which I suspect many will disagree with. And then this was actually Machu Picchu. And the next day we went up to, the opening picture is up there looking down on this. That's Huayna Picchu. And you can climb up there, and we did that. It was during the World Cup, so at night we went and watched World Cup games in Aguascalientes. This is before the final hike into this little, we did sort of a little ceremony and then finished the hike into Machu Picchu. But it was an incredibly liberating moment of, yes, I can do this, and this is all doable. Coming back to that food, my own travel rule, and I included this just for fun and just because this is somewhat related to carbs, I will try anything the locals eat. There are a lot of places where they'll give you touristy food, but the locals don't actually eat it. So all of this is food the locals eat. A lot of this, a good chunk of it is recognizable. Dumplings, that's Peking duck. This is Peking duck bones roasted in cumin, I believe. And then these are just 2 meals. This was in Vietnam, a homemade meal. And I think this was in Beijing, if I remember correctly. The other 2 pictures, any guesses? It is not octopus. A little louder. Rabbit is in the middle. That's the tooth of a rabbit. That's the head of the rabbit. It is duck tongue. You only eat this little bit. I tried to take a big bite of the rest of it. That didn't work, which I found out very quickly. On the rabbit head, I don't know if you know this, believe this, I did not mean to order rabbit head. But we had gone back to a restaurant that my Mandarin-speaking friends had taken us to, and there was a picture of what I wanted, which was rabbit leg, and then I thought I would just point at the thing right below it. Wait, who gave rabbit leg an ew? Is it different than chicken thigh? I mean, the rabbit's cuter, obviously. But the thing right below the picture of the rabbit leg was not, in fact, the menu item for rabbit leg. And the guy came back and pointed at it like this, you want this? And I was like, yeah, of course I want this. I want the rabbit leg I had 2 nights ago. And he delivered me what I had actually ordered, which was rabbit head. Some of this is nothing but a guess in the dark in terms of the carbs. So I'm very careful. In that case, I'll under bolus instead of over bolusing. But I'm willing to give it a shot. What are my problem foods that I try to stay away from? I have had a lot of problems with rice. Everyone in this room has had a lot of problems with pizza, so I try not to do that too often. I wanted to try balut. I will not describe this, nor will I show a picture of it. For those of you who are curious, you all have phones. I want your reaction right there. Yeah, we're all waiting. No pressure. I didn't want my wife to leave me, so I didn't try balut. It is a common street food in Southeast Asia, but I enjoy my marriage more than I enjoy my try everything rule, so I didn't quite go that far with it. You saw the first picture of us in Rome. This is the last picture of us on the trip in Iceland. And there was a feeling of, okay, there's closure here. I will have diabetes possibly for the rest of my life, but it's fine. I'm at peace with my disease, and that was an important moment for me. I'm very glad I came to it that quickly. I think I came to it much faster on the road, because for us, this was our happy place. So to be able to do anything we wanted to do, to be able to travel, to be able to experience all these different experiences all over the world, that made us happy. And if I could do that, then I was at peace with type 1 diabetes. And that's exactly where I wanted to be. I'm not saying I don't have frustrating moments, days, nights. I absolutely do. But if I take the correction, I know it's going to be fine. We decided to keep traveling. My wife got a job very quickly, and I was just doing a little freelance video production. So we went to Panama in February 2015. And this is after I'd been interviewing at CNN for a few months, and it was kind of bubbling along nicely. And then on this specific day, I got my first job offer. I got the job offer from CNN to go to Jerusalem. And this was a Wednesday. And they said, can you be there on, can you fly out on the following Thursday? And I thought, all right, well, I get home Saturday. So that gives us a few nights at home. And then they called me back and said, can you do Wednesday? And I was, all right. And then they, can you do Tuesday? Yes. And then they sent me the tickets and I flew out Monday night. So I had one night at home, and then I began my career in Jerusalem. When I interviewed at CNN, I never told them I had type 1 diabetes. I didn't feel they had the right to know. I don't think I had to tell them. I kept it quiet. I ran my blood sugar high all day, just didn't care. Not that I didn't care. I accepted that risk. But when I started at the Jerusalem Bureau, which is this picture right here, and all of these are on air at the Jerusalem Bureau. These are slightly older pictures. But I immediately told my entire team. And at that point, I had a one-touch. So I had all my test strips. And one of the dumber things I did is I would come back to the US and resupply instead of just getting into Israel's healthcare system, which made things much easier. But I was very open with my team about, look, I have type 1 diabetes. God forbid something happens that you can't handle or that you're not sure about. The first thing you do is call for help. The second thing you do is try to figure out what my blood sugar is. But if you can't do that, go back to step A and call for more help. I had a glucagon. I showed them how to use it. I had one of the practice glucagons, and we would like stab each other, fake stab each other. It's Jerusalem. We were friends. We are friends. And then this is just me at work on random occasions. Anderson, over the course of the last couple of hours here in the Golan Heights, overlooking Syria here behind me, we have seen dozens of rockets fired from Syria into Israeli territory here. We've also seen some interceptions from Israel's Iron Dome aerial defense system. On top of that, we've seen Syrian anti-aircraft firing at what appears to be Israeli surface-to-surface missiles. On top of that, we've also heard what sounds like, Wolf, these results, what happened tonight here, absolutely stunning. Never before in Israel's history has a prime minister failed to put together a new government after an election, but that's exactly what happened to Benjamin Netanyahu as he came up against the deadline to put together a government. He had to cobble together a coalition from his party and smaller parties, something he's done many times before as the longtime leader of Israel.
This morning. Oren, good morning.
Good morning, Dave. It was Palestinian Islamic Jihad inside of Gaza here behind me that announced that a ceasefire had taken effect at 4:30 in the morning. And since 4:30 and just before that, in fact, we haven't heard any of what we've heard here over the course of the past 48 hours. Certainly not. John Bolton is a hawk on Iran, and he took a hard line once again in his statements here just a short time ago, saying that this meeting between the Russia, the U.S., and Israel was all about containing Iran. Initially, just about Iran in Syria. Now, what he calls Iran's malign activity across the region. All of these are different locations. So the first one was in the Golan Heights at like 3 or 4 in the morning, and I got the anchor's name wrong. I thought it was Anderson, but Anderson was out that day, so it was John, and that's always a little awkward. The second one was actually in studio, so what you saw a few seconds ago. And then it was in the field in the middle of daylight. Those days are the hardest for 2 reasons. First, it's boiling hot out, so my blood sugar is just on a constant, steady decline. And then I have to find some way to keep my insulin cool. By this point, and I should say this, I'd switched to what I still use now, which is a Libre. At the time, it was a Libre 1. Now it's a Libre 2. I was surprised by how few people use Libres here. Dexcom appears to be quite a bit more popular. Dexcom wasn't available in Israel, so I have used a Libre since, and that's what I've been using. The hardest days are just out in the field in the boiling sunlight, and I use a Frio wallet to keep my insulin cool. I found that works incredibly well for even long periods of time. And then this is just in a hotel. John Bolton happened to be in Jerusalem at the time. I've been as public as I can be about diabetes. There are certain things I can't do. I can't really, if this were a for-profit company, I probably wouldn't be able to be here. But I try to post my blood sugars, all my blood sugars in November. This is kind of an odd mix here. That's Dikembe Mutombo. He is 1 foot and 2 inches taller than me, I think. That same day I interviewed Benjamin Netanyahu, so that was a bit of a busy day. But this was what's important to me. To show everybody that, I have my blood sugars. I screw them up too. It's fine. I'm not ashamed of it. Now I do it on Twitter just because it's a little easier, but I'll give a little explanation if anyone wants to know, why my blood sugars are the way they are, how happy I am with them. It's my little bit of trying to contribute, not only to making us more visible, but also to trying to educate those who might want to know a little more about what it is we're dealing with. Every travel blogger, and we had a travel blog that is now defunct, every travel blogger who's ever traveled and blogged wants to write a book. For the first half of my trip, I had no idea what the hook of my story was. And then I got diagnosed and I thought, I got it. I have a good story now. So I wrote the Insulin Express that came out. I finished the first draft right when I became a dad. Right when I was on paternity leave with my daughter, I finished the first draft and it came out in May of 2017. The Insulin Express, Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN's chief health correspondent, who's been on air quite a bit over the last few years for whatever reason that is. was kind enough to write an intro. And I've appreciated that. Jeff wrote one of the comments on the back. And for me, it was very cathartic to write this. To go through all my notes, I'd taken notes as we traveled. Difficult at times to essentially dive into experiences that in many cases I'd rather not remember, but there was something that I found wonderful about that process in the long run. So obviously it's my book. I hope you give it a shot. I hope in there you find a bit of humor and inspiration. It was co-published with the American Diabetes Association, which it's cut off right at the bottom. But there is also a part at the end on diabetes itself. I'll show you a picture of the Pentagon booth in a second, but as I was trying to debate, like, do you guys want a tour of the Pentagon booth? It's really tiny. So this is the Jerusalem booth, which was quite a bit more interesting. Yes? Since I can't bring you guys to the Jerusalem Bureau, I figured I'd give you guys a bit of a tour of what our office looks like. This is the newsroom part. This is where we do all of our sort of news gathering and writing and thinking and all that jazz. This is my producer, Mike, who's clearly working hard. This is my desk. Clearly the messiest desk in the office, including my tennis racket and tennis supplies, my diabetes supplies, which are basically just all over the place here. Another producer, and that desk is empty right now. It used to be another reporter. My bureau chief, this is our CNN Espanol correspondent, Jose Levy. And as you can see, we have TVs all over the place. Where the actual TV part of all this happens is here. This is our master control room. This controls the camera. That controls the lights. This is TVs from all over the place and all kinds of instructions. And then when we're in TV from here, this is where I sit. I'll put on a decent shirt and tie. This is Jerusalem here behind me. My apartment is right back there. You can actually see it from the office. And then I look into the camera over there. That's also a teleprompter in case I need to put a script in there. This is a monitor so I can see myself. And below that is, at the moment, what appears to be the Shawshank Redemption, but is normally CNN. Shawshank is way better. Back into the newsroom. This is our master control. This is where all the video comes in and out of the bureaus if we need to send something to Atlanta. This is where my cameraman sits, his editing bay, all of his cameras. This is where we put together our stories after we've shot a story. Our audio booth. If we ever need to do translations, we do it from here. Office manager. And then this is sort of the where I keep stuff. Because we're in the Middle East, one of the things we have to have here is our flak jacket. So if we're ever in clashes or along the Gaza border, we'll put this on. And then sometimes we'll even have to wear one of these. And then if there's tear gas involved, we'll put on one of our gas masks. This is my friendlier looking gas mask. These are quite uncomfortable, but you can talk through them and breathe through them. And every now and again, you need to replace the gas mask canister. But if I really want to scare my parents, I put on the less friendly looking gas mask. A lot of this is old file footage, video we've had in the bureau for years. We keep that in case we need to go. And then once again, as is my style, this is my messy sort of room where I keep everything else, including more diabetes supplies. I am not a health reporter, so it's incredibly rare, especially in Jerusalem or the Pentagon, that I get to step into health. But I was quite surprised when CNN Health and sort of regular CNN decided they would actually be interested in these stories. So when the FAA approved or made the announcement that they would approve the first pilots with type 1 diabetes to fly commercial aircraft, we did a story about it. And let me see the dates here. I think this one is the first story. And then this is actually after they signed them off. After they signed off the first 6 pilots. Did anybody meet the pilot at Dexcom? Pietro Marsala? I think he's headed out. He's not here, is he? I think he headed out yesterday. He's in this story. I interviewed him, talked to him twice on the phone, and then found out he was here through Jeff and immediately made it a point to go over and meet him. And it was awesome to see how many kids were coming up to him and asking him questions. He should probably be here other than me. It's incredibly rare that I get to mention diabetes on air. But in April 2020, a month into the pandemic, a month after the world was shut down, we went into a COVID hospital in Tel Aviv. So I decided this is a good chance to at least bring a little bit of
Deep
attention.
inside Tel Aviv's Sorovsky Medical Center, even the simple answers are hard to find.
It is something else. It's another disease that we are learning all the time, more and more about it.
This is an intensive care unit for COVID-19. The toughest coronavirus cases come here. Before we were allowed in, we had to dress like the medical staff for protection. My blood sugar monitor for type 1 diabetes required an extra wrapping.
I insisted that line be in there, and my managers did not disapprove. So I got to mention that on air, for the only time. I bring this up here just because this is my next adventure, and if any of you have any advice on parenthood, I'm all ears. These are from a few years ago, but the point is that we've also kept traveling. This is in Croatia. There is a Game of Thrones scene shot here. I don't know which one. This is also in Croatia, and this is at my in-laws' house. This is the second longest defensive wall in the world behind the Great Wall of China. The Great Wall of China is like 3,000 miles long. This is like 2 miles long, but there is nothing in between. So it's still the second longest defensive wall. And we've traveled elsewhere as well. So this is Trevendenpunt, the intersection of Germany, the Netherlands, and Belgium, I believe. I believe this is Ghent in Belgium, and then this is actually in Moscow, the Cosmonaut Museum, a few years back. My daughter is now 6. I think she was 1 and 6 months in these pictures. But we've made it a point to keep traveling. COVID slowed it down a bit, but we're getting back to that now. This is what it looks like at the Pentagon. I don't know why I chose this screenshot with that face. There's clearly something about to come out of my nose, but it's a still frame, so we don't have to deal with that. That's what it looks like on air. This is what you see when I'm talking about something. And normally when I'm on air talking about something, that means something is not right in the world. That's what it actually looks like in our little booth. My mom is taking this picture. I'm actually looking at the camera. And I was with my parents in 16, 17 years of doing this as a living. My parents have never seen me go live. So finally they came to visit me at the Pentagon, and they came and saw me do an actual live shot on CNN. And I was really worried Israelis are not known to be the quietest of people, that they would talk. And they just spent the 10 minutes before and like the 5 minutes after shushing each other. And it was quite funny. This is a part where I'll talk a little bit just about how I approach my diabetes. Again, I'm not a health expert. I'm not even a health reporter. This is just what I've found works for me. And I hope somewhere in here there's some bit of inspiration that you can take on, or a new idea that you can ask a doctor. If there is one thing you're going to take away from this conference, if there's one thing you think, okay, I should remember this, make sure it's from a doctor, not a reporter. If there is a second thing, and this took me a while to realize because I was very, very tough on myself for the first few years, this disease does not require perfection. You can make mistakes. And it took me a long time to realize that. You can go high sometimes. You can go low less frequently. But as long as you correct and do the homework, that's it, right? You can just move on and keep doing whatever you want. And that was a big realization for me. We don't have to be perfect about this. We just have to keep doing this. We can't quit on it, and then everything works out from there. Don't be afraid to reach out. There aren't all that many kids here because they're in sessions, but that also applies to the parents as well. I have been happy to shoot videos. I did an Instagram thing and a few parents reached out, so I was happy to shoot a video of myself checking my blood sugar that they were able to personally send to their kid. I'm always happy to do that kind of stuff. I'm never going to cure this because I'm not a doctor, but any little bit of inspiration or help I can give along the way, I'm always happy to do that. And then my few things that I try to do, the most important number for me is the number when I wake up. If I can get that number right, that means I should have gotten the last 8 hours right, and I've nailed a third of my blood sugar. That's a big if, because I've screwed it up many times. I do wake up when I'm low, so I don't have to worry about that. Not that I don't worry about it, but I know I can handle it. But heck, I'm even happy with anything from 110 to 160. After that, I start to get a bit annoyed. But that's my goal. If I can get the 1/3 when I'm sleeping right, I've done a third of the work already, and then I'll just have to, and then the other 2/3 is I'm awake. I eat early. This is also very easy with little kids. I try not to eat after 8. For me, Eating after 8 is a guaranteed bad blood sugar overnight. Now, I will say that I take breaks from this. My in-laws had the kids a couple weekends ago. We tiled the bathroom floor. We got real exciting. And I told my wife we're going out to eat, and I'm getting a steak. And I just ate the steak and the appetizer and the sides and the dessert. And I knew that's it. My blood sugar is not going to be between 70 and 110. It was in mid 200s, but I accepted that and I corrected it. And it was also nice that I was so full I didn't have to eat for half the day. You have heard this before and you will hear it again. I find exercise very helpful for me. If I go 3 or 4 days, I know it will start affecting my blood sugar. The Pentagon is also, I'm much more just sitting in a chair. So if I have something with a lot of carbs in it, it's not uncommon that I'll have to correct more than once to make up for it just because I'm sitting there. And I don't know if it's the insulin doesn't circulate or the blood doesn't circulate well. The nice part about the Pentagon is that it has 17 miles of hallways. So I will get up and walk around. It also has no cell reception in almost the entire building. So my bosses can't reach out to me, which is an added bonus. Just kidding if they're watching. And then I try not to do dessert or alcohol during the week. I've obviously broken this rule. I broke it last night with the apple cobbler and ice cream, but I got my ice cream to apple ratio wrong. There was too much ice cream for the apple cobbler. It was still good. And then I want to do one thing. I want to ask you guys a favor, but I hope this doesn't backfire. My mentor, my first email was to my parents after my diagnosis, and my second was to a very good friend of mine who was diagnosed when he was 10 years old. He's had it for 31 years, and I tried to get him to come to this conference, but he couldn't make it. So we're going to try this. I apologize first if he doesn't answer. I also apologize if he answers with colorful language. But let's give this a shot. Drew, what are you doing?
Walking out on my deck. What are you doing?
I'm in the middle of a presentation.
Oh my goodness.
So this is my mentor, everybody. This is Drew. Drew has had diabetes. So I've told Drew thank you 1,000 times. I've called him 2,000 times for answers and questions. Can I ask of you all a favor? Can we all give Drew a round of applause for helping me out? I could ask you to keep going until he gets emotional.
On the inside, of course.
So Drew, I put my email up a second ago. Oh, no, it's still up, but anything with diabetes auto forwards to your email. That's okay?
Yeah, I got it.
All right, cool. I'll call you later.
Okay. Bye, buddy.
Love you, big guy.
Love you too.
Phew. No colorful language. My email is still up here. This remains my email. I haven't changed it. It does not auto forward to anybody. I'm happy to help on anything I can. I cannot help on medical advice. That's not what I know about. But if you're ever in the area, I live right near the Pentagon. So feel free to come visit. If you ever have a kid who wants a personal video, I'd be happy to do that. That's the kind of stuff I can do. If any of you are curious about aviation stuff and getting into flying, I have some of those answers as well. And if not, I know where to get those answers. But that's my part of trying to contribute to this. I will not cure diabetes. I'm also not holding my breath. But in the meantime, I can try to inspire everyone with diabetes to do whatever it is they wanted to do all along anyway. And that's what I see as my role. Thank you. We have 7 minutes left. I'm happy to take a few questions here. I'm also not going anywhere, so I'm hanging out here to answer all kinds of questions and chat more just personally after this. I'm curious if anybody's going to ask the question I get most often, if anybody asks any questions.
How much was the most expensive Coke you ever bought?
I wish I knew the answer to this. I think it was a can, and I think it was one can was, I think, $3. So it wasn't, it wasn't outrageously expensive, but I expect a can of Coke to be less than that. But then you see the guy, I'm trying to think of I think the word is chusky, which is essentially a another name for a Sherpa. You see them trekking this up on their back and their head, and you're like, okay, that's what I'm paying that for this. I accept that, no problem. The most common question I get, is that a hand up over there? Has it ever alarmed while I'm on the air? I don't think so. I turned off my low alarm. Because I can feel being low, I don't need a low alarm. And my high alarm, I think, is set to 240. I don't think it's gone off on air. I have had lows on air. So when I'm sitting there, before a live shot, I sit there for about 10 minutes just so the show knows I'm there and I can check all the audio and my earpiece. In that 10 minutes, I'll generally check right before, but in that 10 minutes, I have crashed. And I know that there's no glucose gel or glucose tablet or glucose chalk in the world that's going to fix that in 10 minutes. In that case, the theory is answer the question as quickly as possible and pray that there is no follow-up question. It doesn't happen that often because I know I need to check this stuff, but it has happened a couple times and it gets quite uncomfortable.
Why don't you use an insulin pump?
They gave me insulin pens to start, and I have never complained about it. I think it works. I used to inject here, and then Brian Grant, who I don't know if he's in here, but he's at the conference. He checked it out and said, "Look, you're building up scar tissue." So I switched to injecting here and here, and that's worked. The only time I'll inject in my stomach now is if I'm at like a fancy dinner and I don't want to take a suit jacket off and roll up a sleeve. But it works for me. And I'm happy with that, and I haven't switched. One of my very good friends who sent me one of the nicest messages after my diagnosis said, eventually everyone goes to a pump. And I said, look, I believe you. I'll get there at one point. I'm just not there yet. And it works, and I've been happy with it. I'm happy with the Libre as well, just as a way of just knowing sort of a flash glucose monitor. We'll see if I switch to the 3. I've been happy with the 2, and I'm one of those like, look, this works. I'm happy with my A1C, and if it's not broken, don't fix it. But there are some days that I'm willing to try out the latest tech because it's pretty impressive. But right now, I'll stick with what I have. I do always carry this around. This particular one was from Glucology. A few years ago, I bought a Myabetic here. So I could switch to using my phone, but I've just had this. My insulin pen, my basal is up in my room. I'll get it like that, just leave it there. Tabs. A one-touch, thank you. Sometimes the Libre decides to not cooperate with me, and then I have extra lancets and extra needle tips in there. Then I have the vaccine card, and I always keep the charger for the Libre 2. I don't know if I'm the only one who thinks this, but the Libre 2 seems to run out of battery much faster than the Libre 1, so I charge it every couple days. But this is pretty much always with me, and my wife will ask me, do you have your diabetes stuff? And I say, yeah, of course I do, and then like I'll forget my passport. So there is balance in the world. I think I'm running out of time. Somebody should give me a signal. 3 minutes.
So of all the countries you visited, what is the one country you'd say we have to visit? And what is the one country you say don't ever visit?
If you need coffee, pass Laos. I don't know why Laos had the worst coffee I've ever had. It's an incredible country, but not if you're looking for coffee. I don't know what they did, but it tasted like butter in a not good way. My favorite country, my top 3 were Ireland, China, and Thailand. Ireland was, how many have been to Ireland? Good number. Ireland was the greenest place I've ever been, and it blew me away. And it blew me away even more when we'd go to these tiny villages that were off the beaten path. And pubbing is the 5 p.m. activity there, just like it should be in the rest of the world. And everyone immediately wants to, first you're singled out pretty quickly as an outsider. Everyone wants to know who you are, why you're there, buy you a Guinness or Murphy's Irish Stout. So it wasn't just it was gorgeous, and there's a 1,000-year-old castle right there, a 1,000-year-old monastery. The people were incredible. We were in China for 2 weeks, and we got 2 weeks of gorgeous weather, which doesn't really happen in China. There's quite a bit of smog there. But we had a great experience because we knew people to show us around, and that made the experience. I have heard going to China without like friends there who know where to show you can be incredibly difficult. And then I highly recommend Thailand. Although beware, because obviously you're eating noodles and almost all of their sauces have sugar in them. But Thailand is on our trip, it was really our first departure, except from Kenya, from sort of Western living. We actually stopped in Thailand before Nepal, which is why I say that just chronologically. Thailand was incredible, and it was my wife's favorite country. The food is incredible. It is, their temples, their sites are such a departure from anything we've ever seen here. And it's like dirt cheap. If you have spent $5 on dinner, you have fed your entire table here. So that's an added bonus. One more question, and then I'll just hang out here.
Just a quick question as an aviation enthusiast guy.
Wait, raise a hand. I don't even see who's, oh, okay.
What do you usually fly?
So my dad is an aerospace engineer, which means he believes he can fix any problem in the world. He has a PhD, which means he really believes it. I learned on a Cessna 172, great airplane to learn on. I did my instrument on a Warrior, but my dad built a home built. He started in '96. He finished in 2006, and the odd part about my dad is he loves building something that flies, not flying something he built. So he doesn't have his pilot's license yet. That's also, I'm saying this because I didn't send him the link to the presentation, so I know he's not watching. So I'm the only pilot in the family, so the plane just sits there until I'm able to fly it. It's a two-seater. He now realized a two-seater is mostly useless because he's not a pilot, so he's building the four-seat version. And I try to get up there as often as I can, but it's really difficult with two kids. Four people do not fit in a two-person airplane. The hardest part about it was so I got my ticket in '07, and I flew pretty consistently until we traveled, and then I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And one of my friends at the FAA said, don't get a medical exemption for diabetes. Because I don't want to be a commercial pilot or anything like that, you can apply through what's known as basic med, which as long as you're going to be just essentially a putz around pilot, is a much easier way to do things. It was I think it was a 3-year wait. And it was very difficult at the time to find a doctor who would sign off on basic med. And there's a reason for that. If you're curious, we'll chat about it. But I finally did get it signed off, and now I try to fly as often as I can. It's not all that often. I just took my 4-year-old son flying a couple months ago for the first time ever. That was an awesome experience, even if he got just a little bit sick on my wife's jacket. And then I've taken my daughter flying in a rented 172. She was in the back seat with my brother and my nephew. It is just as I feel an obligation to help out however I can on diabetes, I feel anybody who's lucky enough to be a pilot has an obligation to share that. So although it's not part of this particular story, it is certainly a part of my life. And if my wife is listening, I'd like it to be a bigger part of our lives. In fact, I fly out tomorrow morning. She flies to Hawaii with the kids on Sunday. I'll join a week later. But I drop her off at the airport, and I'm driving straight to my plane to go flying because I don't have the kids. I'm here the rest of the day. Come find me anywhere. I'm floating around. Thank you for being here.